Hello everyone. We are going to discuss the 7, 8 and 9 stanzas of Andrew Marvell's Thoughts in a Garden. We see that Marvell moves from physical pleasures of the garden to the mental pleasures where the mind imagines. From this mental pleasure, he moves on to spiritual pleasures in the garden. He writes, "Here at the fountain's sliding foot, or at some fruit tree's mossy root." He says that here in the garden, at the root, sliding foot of the mountain, or the sliding, sloping portion of the fountain, or at some fruit tree's root which is covered with mosses. What happens is, casting the body's vest aside, my soul into the boughs does glide. He says that my soul casts away or keeps aside its physical covering, that is the body, and his soul glides into the boughs of the trees, or the branches of the trees. There like a bird it sits and sings. He says that his soul sits in the branches of the trees and sings like a bird, then wets and combs its silver wings. He imagines that his soul is having wings like a bird, and it ruffles its wings, and till prepared for a longer flight, and it ruffles and trims its feathers till it is prepared for a longer flight. The longer flight is the flight for heaven, waves in its plumes the various lights, and in ruffling its feathers, the soul waves its plumes and makes light flutter like a flag in the wind. So the poet draws the picture of a bird fluttering its wings in preparation for the flight, and thereby the bird makes a checkered or variegated light, falling on them as it were like a flag in the wind. So we see that close to the fountains in the gardens, he says that his soul discards or gives out the outer garment of the body and goes noiselessly from one branch of the tree to the other branch. It glides amongst the branches of the trees, and he imagines that his soul sits like a bird and also sings like a bird. He imagines that the soul preens and combs its bright wings like a bird, as if it is finally preparing itself for a longer flight, that is the flight to heaven. In the next stanza, that is stanza 8, he writes, "Such was that happy garden state, while men there walked without a mate." Here he starts talking about the Garden of Eden or paradise. He says that it was a very happy state in this Garden of Eden or paradise when men walked there alone without a mate. That is, Adam was alone without Eve. Eve was not created at that time, and he was living in a very happy state. After a place so pure and sweet, he says that the Garden of Eden or paradise is such a pure and sweet, beautiful place. What other help could yet be meet? There was nothing suitable which could have accompanied him here. but it was beyond a mortal's share. But he says that it was beyond the happiness which a mortal or a human being could enjoy, and that was to wander solitary alone there in paradise. Two paradises it were in one, to live in paradise alone. He says that to live in paradise, and that too to live alone, was like living in two paradises. And he says that this was beyond the happiness of a human being. A human being could not, or Adam could not, enjoy such a happy state of enjoying two paradises, that is, living in paradise and living in paradise alone. So the poet is referring to the story of the creation of man, which is told in Genesis 2. And he suggests that Adam would have been happier in paradise, that is the Garden of Eden, if Eve would not have been created. And he says that when he found himself in such a pure and sweet place, no comparison could have been appropriate for him. Finding oneself in a pure and sweet place as a Garden of Eden, Adam could not have wished for any companion, and no companion could have suited him. And he says that it was not the happy lot of human beings to be allowed to stay alone in paradise. And living in paradise alone Adam would have enjoyed the happiness of two paradises. One, the paradise, living in the paradise, that is Garden of Eden, and second happiness was the paradise of living alone or being alone in paradise. In the last stanza, or the ninth stanza, he says, "How well the skillful gardener drew of flowers and herbs this dial knew." He imagines that a dial has been created by the gardener in the garden. And he says that the garden has been very skillfully planned by the gardener. It is now viewed as the sundial for marking the passage of time. A sundial whose markings are here in the garden the seasonal flowers and the trees. So this sundial is made from flowers and herbs by the gardener very skillfully. Where from above the milder sun does through the fragrant zodiac run. Where from above? Above these plants and herbs and flowers, the sun shines, and the sun is milder because it shines through the foliage. Does through a fragrant zodiac run. This runs through a fragrant or scented, a flower scented zodiac or course. The garden is now viewed as a clock or dial made of flowers by the poet, and the zodiac is the belt or course of the heavens through which the sun and the planets appear to move in the course of a year. And as it works, the industrious bee, the hard-working bee, as this clock works, the hard-working bee computes its time. It finds out the time of the year or marks the time of the year, as well as we human beings also find the time from this sundial which has been made in the garden. How could such sweet and wholesome flowers How could such sweet and happy hours be reckoned? Be reckoned, recognized, or counted? But means except with herbs and flowers, without the help of herbs and flowers. That is, he says that the bee, which extracts honey from the flowers, can tell the time in the garden, and even we human beings can find out the time by observing the changing flowers at different times of the years, because each flower being as it were a different kind of nectar to sip. So we see that the poet moves from the spiritual pleasures in the garden to the happiness that Adam enjoyed in paradise, and then from here he moves on to the sundial which has been made by the gardener, and he says that the gardener has very skillfully made the flowers and plants grow there in such a manner and pattern that they collectively form a sundial, and the rays of the sun fall on this sundial, and the heat after passes through the green leaves can be compared to the signs of the zodiac, which is the name given to the belt of heavens, which includes all the apparent positions of the sun and the planets. Further, the poet says that the hard working bee, while it is working, that is collecting nectar, is able to find out the passing of the time, and we two human beings can find the town by looking at its sundial. And he says that the passing of such sweet and refreshing hours can be calculated in the garden by the means of the sundial, which has been very skillfully, artfully formed by the gardener, from the plants and flowers. Thank you.